I wasn't looking for giants when I began this investigation. My original focus was architectural anomalies, odd details you notice, catalog, and then usually explain away. Doorways that felt too tall, staircases with unusually high risers, furniture that seemed slightly oversized for human comfort. The kind of historical quirks most researchers dismiss as decorative excess, ceremonial ambition, or the stylistic bravado of a bygone era. First, that's what I did too. I filed them under grandeur and moved on, but then I found the photographs, not paintings, not illustrations, not myths filtered through centuries of folklore, photographs, real, physical photographic plates from the mid to late 1800s, cabinet cards, carte de visite prints, tintype images, and in them stood human beings of impossible scale, men and occasionally women towering beside normally proportioned people. 8 feet tall, 9 feet tall, some approaching 10. At a glance, they looked like crude composites. But they weren't. The grain matched. The lighting matched. The shadows fell correctly across clothing and ground. These images predated the technology required to convincingly fake them. There were no visible distortions, no mismatched exposures, no signs of manipulation, and that's when the official explanations began to collapse. The deeper I searched, the more images surfaced. Photographs from the 1860s, studio portraits from the 1870s, formal group shots where these towering individuals weren't labeled as performers, attractions, or curiosities. They weren't circus acts with stage names or documented tours. They were simply people, dressed in period-appropriate clothing, standing with family members, sometimes positioned front and center, as if their stature required no explanation at all. The British Museum holds several such photographs in its archives. The Smithsonian references similar images briefly, then dismisses them as medical anomalies without further investigation. French collections contain comparable material, neatly cataloged and quietly ignored. Russian imperial records mention individuals of extraordinary height serving in ceremonial and administrative roles. Always the same pattern: acknowledge, categorize, move on, never ask why. Why were there so many? Why do these photographs cluster so tightly between roughly 1850 and 1900 and then abruptly stop? Why were these individuals consistently depicted in formal, official contexts rather than as oddities? And why did no one at the time seem compelled to explain their existence? Those questions refused to stay buried. And once they surfaced, they began pulling everything else up with them. Once you notice the people, you start noticing the spaces built around them. Many of the photographs show these unusually tall individuals standing in front of buildings, massive stone structures, government offices, administrative halls. At first glance, the scale feels dramatic but familiar. We're told such buildings were designed for grandeur, intimidation, or symbolic power. Architecture as theater, architecture as authority, but place a 9-foot-tall human being in the frame, and something unsettling happens. The buildings suddenly make sense. Oversized doorways that once seemed absurd now look properly proportioned. Vast hallways no longer feel wasteful. Staircases with unusually tall risers, so awkward for modern badas, appear perfectly engineered for longer strides. What we've been told is aesthetic excess begins to resemble functional. Design: I began measuring government buildings from the 1700s and 1800s. Routinely feature interior doorways measuring 12 to 15 feet. High, not grand entrances, but working corridors. Back hallways. Administrative passages. Spaces where intimidation serves no purpose and efficiency should matter. Courthouses across the United States, municipal buildings throughout Europe, imperial complexes in Russia and India, all built within the same historical window, all sharing the same oversized proportions. Furniture deepens the puzzle. Desks, chairs, beds preserved in museums or surfacing in estate sales are consistently larger than human norms. Not dramatically so, just enough to be uncomfortable for modern use. Chairs with seat heights of 30 inches or more. Desks that place writing surfaces near chest height for a 6-foot man. These items are labeled custom-made for tall individuals, or decorative Victorian design, as if governments routinely commissioned unusable furniture for offices and waiting rooms, but these weren't ceremonial spaces. These were working buildings, places of governance, administration, oversight. Comfort and practicality would have mattered, and it's not isolated to one region. In St. Petersburg, administrative buildings from the 1700s feature 12-foot doors in internal corridors. In Buenos Aires, municipal structures contain staircases that demand enormous strides. In Delhi, colonial-era government buildings supposedly designed for British administrators include furniture scaled so large that an average man feels child-sized within the room. Thousands of buildings. Same period. Same proportions. Same explanation offered every time. That's just how they built things back then. But that explanation collapses under repetition. Why spend more money, more material, more labor to construct impractical spaces unless the people using them weren't average-sized? And once that question is asked, it becomes impossible not to notice what else appears in the same places during the same decades, and then vanishes just as suddenly because architecture wasn't the only thing scaled differently. That's where Tartaria stops being a footnote and becomes unavoidable. If you examine maps from the 1700s and early 1800s, Tartaria appears plainly labeled sometimes as Great Tartary, spanning vast regions of northern and central Asia. It isn't presented as legend or speculation. It sits on the page with the same casual certainty as France or Spain, referenced in atlases, encyclopedias, and academic texts of the time. Then, in the mid-1800s, it vanishes, not conquered. Not renamed, erased. Maps are redrawn. Encyclopedias quietly omit it. History books move forward as if the region never existed as a coherent entity. No transitional explanation. No detailed collapse. Just absence, yet the architecture remains across Central Asia. Russia, Mongolia, and neighboring regions stand massive stone buildings of extraordinary scale and precision. Structures with doorways that feel absurd for modern humans but appear perfectly proportioned when compared to the giants in 19th century photographs. Halls that echo with emptiness. Walls cut and assembled with a level of engineering accuracy that challenges the technological assumptions of the era. Their supposedly built-in official explanations vary. Local craftsmen, lost techniques, imperial ambition. What's missing is documentation. No verified construction records, no detailed labor accounts, no clear explanation for how such engineering feats were achieved with the tools and methods we're told were available, and the pattern mirrors the photographs. The giants appear informal. Official context guards, overseers, administrators. Contemporary accounts describe them not as oddities, but as normal members of society holding positions of authority. Russian imperial records reference unusually tall individuals serving ceremonial and supervisory roles. French and British archives acknowledge similar figures, then move on without curiosity. Always the same process. Acknowledge, categorize, forget. What if the giants weren't anomalies at all? What if they were functional members of a system? A specialized class: guardians, administrators, overseers of infrastructure and construction? Their size wouldn't be symbolic. It would be practical. A body capable of moving heavy materials, operating massive tools, overseeing large-scale projects without the constraints modern humans face. That would explain the architecture. Why government buildings, courthouses, and administrative centers are oversized while residential spaces remain human-scaled. Why photographs place giants in positions of authority rather than domestic settings. Why the buildings feel inherited, repurposed. For bodies they were never designed to fit, and it would explain why both the giants and Tartaria disappear from the record at the same time. If a civilization collapsed or was absorbed, what survives first? The structures. What disappears first? The people who proved those structures weren't built by the society now occupying them. Erase the builders. Rewrite the dates. Adjust the narrative, but architecture has a memory, and it remembers proportions we've been taught to ignore. The photographic record isn't the only place the giants appear. Throughout the 1800s and into the early 1900s, newspapers across the United States regularly reported discoveries of giant human skeletons. Not sensational tabloids, mainstream publications, local papers, national outlets. Reports treated as newsworthy but not extraordinary. The New York Times, 1885. A 7-foot skeleton uncovered in a Michigan mound. The San Diego Union, 1895. Bones of extraordinary size found during railroad excavation. The Middletown Signal, 1899. Giant human remains discovered in Ohio. These accounts weren't isolated. They described organized burial sites, not random anomalies. Skeletons measuring anywhere from 7 to 12 feet in length. Many were reportedly accompanied by artifacts, metal tools, ornaments, objects suggesting advanced knowledge of construction and metallurgy. Then something changes. After roughly 1920, these reports stop. Not gradually, abruptly, discoveries that once appeared routinely in newspapers simply vanish from public record. The skeletons already recovered were often sent to institutions like the Smithsonian for further study. Today, the Smithsonian claims no such remains exist in their collections, missing, lost, misplaced. During routine transfers, hundreds of specimens gone without documentation. The timing matters. The skeleton discoveries peak in the late 1800s, the same decades the giant photographs appear. The same period Tartaria disappears from maps. Then everything goes quiet. No more reports. No more photographs. No more questions. And the artifacts don't end with bones across Europe and North America. Demolition sites and estate cleanouts have yielded massive tools wrenches 4 to 6 feet long, weighing hundreds of pounds. These aren't ceremonial pieces. They show wear patterns, grip erosion, evidence of prolonged use. Tools clearly designed for hands far larger and stronger than ours. Museums label them industrial equipment without explaining what industrial process required a wrench no normal human could operate. Auction houses sell them as curiosities. No one asks why so many exist or who used them. Pair those tools with the oversized furniture chairs with seat heights of 30 to 36 inches, armrests placed absurdly high, backs rising 7 or 8 feet, and the explanation of decorative design stops working. These weren't thrones meant to intimidate. They were ordinary chairs, dining chairs, desk chairs, furniture built for daily use. Suddenly, the bones, the tools, the furniture, the buildings, they stop being anomalies. They become parts of the same system, and systems don't disappear by accident. By the time all the pieces are laid side by side, coincidence stops being a reasonable explanation. The photographs of giants cluster between 1850 and 1900. The newspaper reports of giant skeletons peak in the same decades. Tartaria vanishes from maps during that exact period. Architectural proportions from government and administrative buildings align with the scale of those photographed individuals. Oversized tools and furniture appear in quantities far too large to dismiss as novelty. Then everything ends. The photographs stop. The newspaper reports stop. The maps change. Encyclopedias rewrite themselves, as if certain questions were suddenly no longer acceptable to ask. What's most unsettling isn't the possibility that giants existed. Human biological diversity has always been wider than official narratives admit. What's unsettling is the coordinated silence. Academic institutions don't debate the evidence, they ignore it. Museums don't display the photographs, they archive them under vague classifications. Historical societies don't analyze. Architectural scale, they dismiss it as artistic preference. It isn't active suppression. It's something quieter and more effective, passive erasure. Questions that aren't asked, evidence that isn't examined, connections that aren't made because making them leads somewhere. Uncomfortable. If the giants were real and the physical evidence suggests they were, then history isn't the clean progression we've been taught. It becomes inheritance. We may be living inside structures we didn't build, using systems we only partially understand, surrounded by architecture scaled for bodies that no longer exist. That would explain the adaptive reuse. Why massive halls feel empty? Why doorways seem excessive? Why staircases strain the human body instead of accommodating it? We've adjusted the world to fit ourselves, not realizing it wasn't designed for us in the first place. The giants in the photographs weren't monsters. They weren't myths. They were people, individuals with faces, clothing, families. Their presence was so unremarkable in their time that photographers felt no need to explain them. We made them remarkable by erasing them. We made them impossible by denying them. The buildings remember what the books forgot. The photographs preserve what encyclopedias erased. And the evidence remains, waiting for someone willing to ask the questions others have agreed to avoid. Who were the giants? Why did they disappear? And what else vanished with them that we've been pretending was never here at all? Those questions matter not because they rewrite history, but because they reveal how easily history can be rewritten without us noticing.